get your more reaction then to that International Monetary Fund decision to grant South Africa that COVID-19 Relief Fund loan. We can speak now to Neil Coleman, co-director of the Institute for Economic Justice. Neil, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. A lot of criticism this loan has received since that announcement last night. Has the South African government bitten off much more than we can chew here?
Well, time will tell, Temekile. I think there are a lot of questions which people are correctly asking about the loan. And we must understand that the skepticism that people have about the IMF results from a very sorry history of that institution, particularly in Africa and other developing countries. So when people ask questions, I think they ask it from that point of view. Secondly, the Institute for Economic Justice, when we initially proposed a rescue package, indicated that some international support of this nature could be sought. However, it should be subject to two critical qualifications. The one is that there should be no conditionalities which impinge upon the sovereignty of South Africa. And secondly, that there should be transparency and full consultation with civil society, with society more broadly around the terms of the loan. Now, neither of those conditions have been met. We don't know what the South African government has committed to the IMF. And secondly, there's been no transparency and involvement of society more broadly. The loan itself is supposed to be not as onerous as the IMF's normal loans. This is, the rapid financing facility, which is there to address a crisis of the type that we're confronting now. So on the face of it, it's a low-interest loan. The South African government needs access to finance so that if these other questions were met, there may be an argument to be made for it. The other point is that we don't have any coherent strategy that has been announced by government going forward to finance the massive needs that we have in the face of this crisis. There are going to be needs for further rescue packages, etc. So, something that simply appears to rely on foreign financing, and there's no coherent strategy to mobilize domestic resources, raises many, many questions.
But how much room does government have to maneuver, Neil, in terms of raising this sort of capital domestically?
Well, it is a challenging environment, but there are alternatives. So, for example, there are various forms of taxation which haven't been considered, and Treasury hasn't engaged on the many proposals that have been put forward by, for example, the Budget Justice Coalition or the Institute for Economic Justice around alternative taxation proposals. We have massive wealth concentrated at the top in South Africa. And when we talk about the levels of income inequality, wealth inequality is even greater. So much of that wealth is untapped and is not being harnessed. Secondly, we have large amounts of unused capital lying on in bank accounts by the private sector. We have the retirement funds and so on. So no one is saying that these resources must be plundered or used in any sort of irresponsible manner, but the resources are there. And South Africa is very fortunate at this point, unlike many other countries, that our borrowing requirements have been met largely by domestic borrowing, and much of our borrowing is in rands rather than in foreign currency. So it's an issue of balance. Achieving the required balance in these forms of financing.
And one of the objectives, of course, is to make sure that economically this loan from the IMF is used as sort of an injection, a shot, if you will, to try and help the economy where it is battling over and above assisting frontline workers and those sort of services. But how do we make sure that the poorest and most vulnerable among South Africans are able to benefit from this costly loan?
Yeah, so Temekile, there's a general, if you look at social media and commentary in South Africa more generally at the moment, people are massively suspicious of any funds which the South African government is spending, because there's this perception that it's just going to go into corruption and into back pockets. That's an issue that doesn't relate specifically to the IMF loan. It relates to all spending by the government, and there needs to be put in place much stronger instruments to deal with issues of tenders, procurement, etc., so that these forms of abuses are countered. But clearly, in the case of the IMF grant, the IMF loan, it's supposed to be directed to particular areas of emergency spending. And that's one of the areas of transparency that we need to see as to where this is supposed to be directed. In part, because it's in foreign currency, we're getting dollars, it may be used for, for other sort of areas which are not related directly to relief in relation to COVID. So that's what we were saying, is that there needs to be an overall package. This needs to be part of a broader financing plan which government puts to South Africa. Unfortunately, the plan which the Minister of Finance put to the country in the supplementary budget was simply one of brutal austerity, cutting back on a massive scale. So it doesn't make sense to be borrowing money on the one hand and then on the other cutting in areas which are precisely the areas that people need to see targeted spending, such as health, the employment, including the employment of health workers, and dealing with the massive challenges that COVID is presenting us with, including bailing out or rather assisting businesses who are currently struggling, assisting workers who are losing jobs or are being put on half-time, and so on and so forth. And we're not seeing that package being put forward. So this needs to be part of a broader discussion in South Africa about an economic response to this crisis.
Neil Coleman, co-director of the Institute for Economic Justice, thank you for your time this afternoon, sir.
Thank you.